I walked into Romano's Italian restaurant that Tuesday evening, my heart practically bursting with excitement about the news I was dying to share with my family. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary dinner was supposed to be our celebration, but I had my own incredible announcement waiting. Then everything went sideways. Dad stood up, raised his wine glass, and declared my sister Madison the greatest gift of our marriage, while presenting her with a $16,000 Cartier watch that gleamed under the chandelier lights. As they arranged themselves for family photos, I realized with growing horror that I was being deliberately left out of every single shot. The final crushing blow came when Dad toasted Madison as their true pride and joy, while I sat invisible at the far end of our table. I sat frozen in my chair watching Madison beam as she modeled her new watch for the restaurant staff. The diamond-encrusted timepiece caught every reflection from the overhead lighting, creating tiny rainbows that danced across the white tablecloth. My mind reeled trying to process what had just unfolded before my eyes. This wasn't some spontaneous gesture of affection. The watch came in its original Cartier box, complete with certificates of authenticity and warranty papers. My parents had planned this moment, carefully researching the exact model Madison had casually mentioned, admiring in a magazine 3 months ago. They had saved money specifically for this purchase money that could have gone toward practical things like home repairs or retirement savings. But here's what really twisted the knife in my chest. I had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks, not just to celebrate their milestone, but because I finally had news that would make them proud. My tech startup, which I had built from nothing over the past 4 years, had just been acquired by a major corporation for $52 million. $52 million. The contracts were signed, the deal was public, and I was about to become one of the youngest successful entrepreneurs in our city. Instead, I found myself watching my parents fawn over Madison's latest accomplishment, landing a non-speaking role in a community theater production of Our Town. She would be playing townsperson number 3, appearing on stage for exactly 7 minutes total, across all 3 acts. The memories started flooding back as I picked at my untouched osso buco. Madison's high school graduation party had been held at the country club with 200 guests and a live band. My graduation from Stanford had been commemorated with dinner at Olive Garden and a grocery store cake. When Madison turned 21, our parents threw her a surprise party complete with a professional photographer and custom decorations. When I turned 25 and launched my company, they forgot entirely until I reminded them 3 days later. Madison had always been their shining star, their creative genius who needed special nurturing and understanding. She was the one with artistic temperament, delicate feelings and dreams that required financial support. I was the practical one, the self-sufficient one, the daughter who could handle things on her own without requiring parental investment or emotional energy. "Teresa seems upset about something," Madison announced suddenly, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when she wanted to draw attention to someone else's perceived shortcomings. "Maybe she's having boyfriend troubles again." I wasn't having boyfriend troubles. I had ended my last relationship 6 months ago because building a company required every ounce of my focus and energy. But Madison's comment achieved its intended effect. Suddenly all eyes were on me, waiting for an explanation of my obvious discomfort. "I'm fine," I managed, forcing what I hoped looked like a genuine smile. "Just tired from work." Dad nodded knowingly. "That's the problem with these tech jobs. Too much stress, not enough real human connection. Madison's theater work is much more fulfilling spiritually." I excused myself to use the restroom, needing a moment away from the table before I said something I would regret. In the bathroom mirror, I stared at my reflection and wondered when I had become invisible to my own family. When had my achievements become background noise to Madison's mediocrity? Walking back toward our table, I overheard my mother talking to the couple seated nearby. "Our youngest daughter just got the lead in a major theatrical production," she was saying, gesturing toward Madison. "She's incredibly talented. We're so proud of her artistic vision." Madison hadn't gotten the lead. She had gotten a non-speaking background role that paid nothing and required her to provide her own costume. but somehow, in my mother's retelling, this became a starring role in a major production. I slipped back into my seat quietly, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop even further. While I was gone, they had taken more family photos. Madison was showing them off on her phone, swiping through image after image of the three of them smiling together. In every single photo, there was an empty chair where I should have been sitting. "Oh, Teresa's back," Madison said, not looking up from her phone. "We got some great shots while you were gone. The lighting is perfect at this table." "We should get the check soon," I announced, reaching for my purse. "I have an early meeting tomorrow." This wasn't entirely true. My meeting wasn't until 10 in the morning, and it was a celebration breakfast with my business partners and lawyers to commemorate our successful acquisition. But I couldn't sit through another minute of watching my sister bask in undeserved adoration while my parents treated me like an afterthought. As we waited for the bill, Madison started talking about her upcoming audition for a regional commercial. She described it as a major opportunity with a national brand, though from her description, it sounded like a 30-second spot for a local furniture store. My parents hung on her every word, asking detailed questions about her preparation process and offering advice about wardrobe choices. The drive home was quiet, with Madison and my parents discussing her theater schedule, while I stared out the window at the passing streetlights. When Dad dropped me off at my apartment, he barely waited for me to get out of the car before pulling away. Madison waved from the front seat, her new watch catching the glow from my building's entrance lights. Inside my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch, still trying to process the evening's events. That's when I decided to do something I had never done before. I walked out to my car and drove to my parents' house. Not to confront them, but to understand something that had been nagging at me all night. Their house was dark except for the guest house in the back where Madison lived rent-free in what used to be Dad's workshop. I could see light coming from the small garage attached to the guest house, which struck me as odd since Madison didn't own a car. Curiosity got the better of me. The garage had windows that faced the main house, and they weren't covered with curtains. What I saw inside made my blood run cold. Boxes and boxes stacked against the far wall, each one labeled with my name. I recognized some of them immediately, the floral arrangement my business mentor had sent when I closed my first major client contract, the congratulations cards from my college friends when I got featured in a local business magazine, the bottle of champagne my neighbor had left on my doorstep when she saw the newspaper article about my startup's early success. All of these things had supposedly never arrived. When I had asked my parents about whether anyone had dropped off gifts or cards, they had always said no, nothing had come to the house. But there they were, hidden in Madison's garage like some twisted treasure hoard of stolen recognition. The next morning, I couldn't concentrate on anything except those boxes in Madison's garage. I called in sick to work something I hadn't done in over 2 years and spent the day researching public records and family financial documents that I had access to through our shared accountant. What I discovered made me physically ill. For the past 6 years since Madison graduated from college, my parents had been providing her with what they called artistic support funding. The bank records showed monthly transfers of $2,000, supposedly temporary loans, to help her get established in her creative career. None of these loans had ever been repaid. The total amount exceeded $50,000. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was discovering where some of that money had originally come from. When I was 16, my grandmother had established college funds for both Madison and me. Each fund contained $25,000, meant to supplement whatever scholarships or financial aid we could secure. I had used $18,000 from my fund for Stanford expenses, leaving $7,000 that was supposed to remain untouched until I needed it for graduate school or other educational pursuits. Except that $7,000 was gone. It had been transferred to Madison's account in 3 installments during her senior year of college to pay for private acting classes, professional headshots, and what the bank records described as portfolio development expenses. When I called our family accountant, Janet Morrison, she seemed surprised to hear from me. "Teresa, honey, I thought you knew about the fund transfers. Your parents said you had agreed to help support Madison's career development." I had never agreed to any such thing. I had never even been told that my money was being used for Madison's expenses. Janet. I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "Can you send me copies of all the family financial documents that include my name or social security number? I need to review some discrepancies." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Teresa, are you sure you want to see all of this? Some of it might be complicated family business." Her hesitation told me everything I needed to know. There were more financial secrets, more money that had been moved around without my knowledge. The documents arrived by email within an hour, and they painted a picture of financial manipulation that went far beyond the college fund transfers. My parents had taken out a business loan 18 months ago using my company's early success metrics as part of their creditworthiness assessment. They had included copies of my business plan revenue projections and client testimonials in their loan application, presenting themselves as business consultants who had helped guide my startup's development. This was completely false. Not only had my parents never provided business advice, they had actively discouraged me from starting my own company. Dad had spent months trying to convince me to take a stable corporate job instead of gambling on entrepreneurship. But somehow they had used my achievements to secure a $30,000 loan that they had then funneled directly to Madison for her failed movie project. Yes, movie project. According to the loan documents, Madison had convinced our parents that she was going to star in an independent film called Midnight Confessions. She had presented them with a script, a budget breakdown, and contracts with a production company called Silver Screen Dreams, LLC. I spent the afternoon researching Silver Screen Dreams and discovered that it had been dissolved 6 months ago for failing to file required business documentation. The registered address was a UPS mailbox in a strip mall 20 miles away. The producer, listed on Madison's contracts, was named Derek Jameson, and a quick social media search revealed that Derek Jameson was Madison's boyfriend from 8 months ago, the one she had claimed was too creative and misunderstood when they broke up. My parents had given Derek and Madison $30,000 for a movie that never existed. When I called my parents that evening to ask about the loan, their response was immediate and defensive. "Teresa, you're successful now," Mom said. "You don't need our help anymore. Madison is still building her career and she deserves our support." "But you used my business information without asking me," I explained. "You claim to be my business consultants when you've never been involved in my company." Dad's voice took on that familiar tone of irritation he used whenever I questioned family decisions. "We raised you, Teresa. We supported you through college. Everything you've accomplished is built on the foundation we provided. If we want to use that success to help your sister, that's our right as parents." I hung up feeling more confused and angry than I had ever felt in my life. That evening, I drove back to the restaurant where we had celebrated my parents' anniversary the night before. I needed to talk to someone neutral, someone who might help me make sense of what was happening. The manager, Anthony Rossi, recognized me immediately. "Miss Chen. How wonderful to see you again. Did you forget something last night?" "Actually, I wanted to ask you about something," I said. "During dinner last night, did my parents mention anything about my business or career?" Anthony nodded enthusiastically. "Oh yes, they were so proud. They told our whole staff about your sister's big movie deal and how they've been guiding her career in Hollywood. They said the family business expertise runs in the blood." My heart sank. Even here at a restaurant where we had eaten dozens of times over the years, my parents had managed to erase my achievements and replace them with fabricated stories about Madison's non-existent success. "Did they mention anything about a tech company?" I pressed. "Or any business acquisitions?" Anthony looked confused. "No, just the movie industry stuff. They were very excited about your sister's upcoming film debut. They said she's going to be the next big thing in independent cinema." I thanked Anthony and left the restaurant feeling more isolated than ever. My parents weren't just favoring Madison over me. They were actively rewriting history to position her as the successful daughter while portraying me as what I wasn't even sure what role I was supposed to play in their narrative anymore. Back at home, I spent the evening going through old family photos and documents looking for clues about when this favoritism had started and how deep it really went. What I found in a box of tax documents made me realize that the financial manipulation had been going on much longer than I had imagined. 3 years ago, when I had received my first major business award from the Chamber of Commerce, my parents had somehow managed to get themselves listed as co-recipients in the local newspaper announcement. The article described them as instrumental mentors in their daughter's entrepreneurial journey, and quoted my mother as saying, "We always knew Teresa had potential, but it took family guidance to help her channel it effectively." I had never seen this article before. My parents had never mentioned being interviewed by the newspaper, but there it was, in black and white proof, that they had been taking credit for my accomplishments while simultaneously providing zero actual support. The final piece of evidence I discovered that night was perhaps the most revealing. Hidden in a folder marked insurance documents, I found a copy of my parents' updated life insurance policy. Madison was listed as the primary beneficiary for both policies, set to receive $800,000 upon their deaths. I was listed as the secondary beneficiary, eligible to receive any remaining funds after Madison's portion had been distributed. This meant that if my parents died tomorrow, Madison would inherit their house, their savings, their investments, and their life insurance money. I would receive whatever was left over after Madison had taken everything else. I had been written out of my own family's future, and I was apparently the last person to know about it. The call came at 6:30 in the morning, 3 days after I had discovered the insurance policy changes. My lawyer, David Kimball, sounded stressed in a way that immediately put me on high alert. "Teresa, we need to meet today. There's a problem with your acquisition deal." "What kind of problem?" I asked, though my stomach was already dropping with dread. "The kind that involves fraudulent loan documents and potential criminal liability. Can you be in my office by 8? I threw on clothes and drove to David's law firm in a state of panic. The acquisition deal represented 4 years of my life's work. It was supposed to close in 2 weeks, marking the culmination of everything I had sacrificed and struggled to build. David's conference room table was covered with documents when I arrived. He looked like he hadn't slept, and his usually pristine suit was wrinkled. "Teresa, sit down," he said without preamble. "Yesterday we received a call from Sterling Industries' legal team. They're concerned about some irregularities in your company's financial background check." My mouth went dry. Sterling Industries was the corporation acquiring my company. Their due diligence process had been thorough but straightforward, and I thought we had satisfied all their requirements weeks ago. "What kind of irregularities?" David spread several papers in front of me. "These are copies of loan applications that list your company as collateral for personal debts. The applications were submitted by Robert and Linda Chen, claiming to be your business partners and financial advisors." Robert and Linda Chen, my parents. "They used your company's revenue projections client lists and proprietary business information to secure multiple loans," David continued. "The total amount exceeds $60,000, and according to the loan documents, your company's assets are pledged as security if the borrowers default." I stared at the papers, recognizing my business plan language and financial projections mixed in with information I had never provided to anyone. Somehow my parents had accessed confidential business documents and used them to secure loans that could now jeopardize my entire acquisition deal. "How is this possible?" I whispered. "I never authorized this." "That's the problem," David said grimly. "The signatures on these documents appear to be yours. If Sterling Industries determines that you willingly pledged your company as collateral for personal loans, they can void the acquisition deal for misrepresentation." He slid another document across the table. It was a signature page with my name written in handwriting that looked remarkably similar to mine, but with subtle differences that suggested forgery. "David, I never signed this. I've never even seen this document before." "I believe you," he said, "but we need to prove it. This kind of forgery is a federal crime, but proving it could take months. Sterling Industries isn't going to wait while we sort out criminal charges against your parents." The rest of the meeting was a blur of legal terminology and worst-case scenarios. If the acquisition deal collapsed, I would not only lose $52 million, but my company's reputation would be destroyed. Other potential buyers would assume that any business with this kind of family legal drama was too risky to touch. After leaving David's office, I drove directly to my parents' house. I needed answers, and I needed them immediately. I found them in their backyard garden calmly planting tulip bulbs, as if they hadn't just committed multiple felonies that could destroy my career. "We need to talk," I announced, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. Mom looked up from her gardening gloves with an expression of mild annoyance. "Teresa, what's gotten into you lately? You've been so hostile since the anniversary dinner." "What's gotten into me is discovering that you've been forging my signature and using my company as collateral for loans I never authorized." The color drained from Dad's face, but he recovered quickly. "That's a very serious accusation, Teresa. I think you need to be careful about throwing around legal terms you don't understand." "I understand them perfectly," I shot back. "I also understand that what you've done is called fraud, forgery, and identity theft. My acquisition deal is now in jeopardy because of your illegal actions." Madison emerged from the guest house, drawn by the raised voices. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a cup of coffee, looking like she was settling in to enjoy the drama. "What acquisition deal?" Mom asked, looking genuinely confused. "The one I was going to tell you about at dinner the other night, before you were too busy celebrating Madison's walk-on theater role to listen to anything I had to say." "You never mentioned any acquisition," Dad said defensively. "Because you never gave me the chance. You spent the entire evening talking about Madison's Cartier watch and her 7 minutes of stage time." Madison laughed, actually laughed at my obvious distress. "Teresa, you're being ridiculous. Mom and Dad were just celebrating my artistic achievements. Not everything is about business and money." "This isn't about business and money," I exploded. "This is about the fact that my own parents have been systematically undermining my career while stealing my identity to fund your imaginary movie projects." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's face had gone completely white, and Mom was staring at me like I had lost my mind. "How did you find out about the movie funding?" Madison asked quietly, her casual demeanor suddenly shifting to something more calculating. "So you admit it," I said. "You admit that Derek Jameson scammed you out of $30,000 for a fake movie, and our parents covered it up by forging documents and using my business as collateral." "Derek didn't scam anyone," Madison said defensively. "The project fell through because of industry politics. These things happen in Hollywood all the time." "Madison," Dad said sharply, "don't say anything else." But it was too late. Madison had already confirmed what I suspected they all knew about the fraudulent loans, and they had all participated in covering them up. "I want every penny of that money repaid," I said. "And I want all of you to stay away from my business, my clients, and my professional reputation." Mom finally spoke up, her voice cold and bitter. "Teresa, you've become someone we don't recognize. Success has made you greedy and selfish. We raised you better than this." "You raised me to succeed despite your neglect," I replied. "Everything I've accomplished has been in spite of this family, not because of it." I left them standing in their garden and drove home, my hands shaking so badly I could barely steer. The full scope of their betrayal was becoming clear, but I suspected there were still more revelations waiting to be uncovered. That evening, my business partner Jake called with news that made everything infinitely worse. "Teresa, I just got a weird call from someone claiming to be your sister. She wanted to know if we were hiring any actors for promotional videos." "What did you tell her?" "I told her we weren't, but she kept pressing for information about our client list and upcoming projects. She said she was trying to help you network within the entertainment industry." Madison was now actively attempting to infiltrate my business relationships, using her supposed connection to me as leverage. But why? What could she possibly gain from getting involved with my tech company? The answer came 2 hours later when Jake called back with an update that made my blood run cold. Teresa, that woman who called earlier, she just contacted 3 of our biggest clients directly. She told them she was your business partner and that she needed to discuss some urgent financial irregularities in our company accounts. Madison wasn't just trying to benefit from my success, she was actively working to destroy it. The next morning brought a crisis that threatened to unravel everything I had worked for. David called at 7 a.m. with news that Sterling Industries was formally suspending the acquisition process, pending a full investigation into my company's financial practices. "Teresa, it gets worse," he said. "Madison has been calling Sterling's executives directly claiming to be your business partner. She's told them that your company has been hiding debt obligations and that the family loans represent undisclosed liabilities." I sat down hard on my kitchen floor, the phone pressed against my ear as my world collapsed around me. How does she even know who to call at Sterling? That's what we need to figure out. She's had specific information about the acquisition timeline, the executives involved, and the terms of the deal. Someone with access to confidential documents has been feeding her information. As soon as I hung up with David, I called my business partner Jake and asked him to meet me at the office immediately. We needed to conduct a thorough security audit to determine how Madison had obtained sensitive information about our business operations. What we discovered was worse than I had imagined. Our phone system records showed that someone had been accessing our voicemail system using my extension code for the past 3 months. The access always occurred late at night or early in the morning when the office was empty. Whoever was doing this had been listening to confidential conversations with clients, lawyers, and potential investors. "How would someone get your extension code?" Jake asked as we reviewed the security logs. "The only people who have it are immediate family." I said, my stomach sinking. "I gave it to my parents 2 years ago in case they ever needed to reach me during emergencies." Further investigation revealed that the security breaches went beyond just voicemail access. Someone had been monitoring my business email account through our shared family phone plan. My parents had added my business phone to their family plan 3 years ago as a cost-saving measure. But this arrangement had apparently given them administrative access to my communications. Every email I had sent or received regarding the acquisition deal, every confidential conversation with lawyers and investors, every strategic discussion with potential partners had been accessible to my parents. And they had been sharing this information with Madison. Jake pulled up the records and showed me the pattern. "Look at this, Teresa. Every time you had a major business call or sent an important email, Madison made contact with your clients or partners within 24 hours. She's been systematically sabotaging your relationships using insider information." The scope of the surveillance was staggering. My parents had been tracking my business activities, monitoring my communications, and sharing sensitive information with Madison for years. This wasn't just favoritism or financial manipulation, it was corporate espionage conducted by my own family. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Jake's security audit uncovered evidence that someone had been accessing our client database and copying proprietary information about our software development processes. This information had been packaged and presented to our competitors as part of what appeared to be a consulting proposal. The proposal was submitted by a company called Creative Solutions Consulting, which listed Madison Chen as its founder and CEO. According to the business registration documents, Creative Solutions Consulting had been established 6 months ago with the stated purpose of providing technology strategy guidance to entertainment industry startups. Madison had been using stolen information from my company to establish herself as a technology consultant, selling our proprietary processes and client strategies to our competitors. She had literally built a business around betraying mine. When I confronted my parents about the surveillance and information theft, their response was chilling in its complete lack of remorse. "Teresa, you're being paranoid," Mom said dismissively. "We're your parents. We have a right to know what's going on in your life, especially when it affects the family's reputation." "Monitoring my business communications isn't parental concern," I said. "It's criminal activity." Dad's response was even more disturbing. Madison is trying to build her own career, and she deserves the same opportunities you've had. If she can use her connections to your business to create opportunities for herself, that's just smart networking. Smart networking. She's committed corporate espionage and violated multiple federal laws. Don't be so dramatic, Dad said. Madison is just trying to find her place in the world. Your success has overshadowed her accomplishments, and we're simply trying to level the playing field. Level the playing field. That phrase revealed everything about how my parents viewed the situation. In their minds, my success was somehow unfair to Madison, and their job was to handicap me enough to give her a better chance at achieving recognition. The conversation ended when Madison herself arrived, having been summoned by my parents during our argument. She walked into their living room with the confidence of someone who believed she was about to be defended and supported. "Teresa, I hear you're upset about my new consulting business," she said with a smile that made my skin crawl. "I want you to know that everything I've done has been completely legal. Public information is fair game in competitive markets." Public information. I stared at her in disbelief. "You've been accessing my private business communications and stealing proprietary data." "I've been doing research," Madison replied smoothly. "Mom and Dad have been keeping me informed about your business activities as part of our family discussions. If you didn't want your business strategies to be family knowledge, maybe you shouldn't have involved Mom and Dad in your company's financial planning." This was a complete lie. I had never involved my parents in any aspect of my company's financial planning or strategic decisions, but Madison was presenting their surveillance activities as legitimate family communication. The gaslighting continued as my parents backed up Madison's version of events. According to them, I had been regularly sharing confidential business information during family dinners and phone conversations. They claimed that Madison's consulting business was based on general knowledge rather than stolen data. Besides, Madison added, "Your acquisition deal was never guaranteed anyway. Business deals fall through all the time. Maybe Sterling Industries just realized that your company isn't as valuable as you thought it was." That was when I realized that Madison wasn't just trying to benefit from my success or even destroy my current business deal. She was trying to destroy my reputation and credibility so thoroughly that I would never be able to recover professionally. "Why?" I asked her directly. "Why are you doing this to me?" Madison's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never noticed before: genuine hatred. "Because," she said quietly, "you think you're so much better than everyone else. You think your little computer company makes you special, but you're just a fraud who got lucky, and it's time for everyone to see that." The room fell silent. Even my parents seemed surprised by the venom in Madison's voice. "Madison," Mom said uncertainly, "that's not necessary." "Yes, it is," Madison replied, her voice growing stronger. "Teresa has spent her whole life making the rest of us feel inferior. She gets perfect grade starts, a successful business, gets featured in magazines. But she's not actually better than us. She's just better at fooling people into thinking she's something special." I stood up slowly, understanding finally dawning on me. This wasn't about money or favoritism or family dynamics. This was about Madison's fundamental inability to accept that I had achieved something through my own hard work and talent. "Madison," I said carefully, "I never tried to make anyone feel inferior. I just worked hard and tried to build something meaningful." "Stop lying," Madison shouted. "You've been rubbing your success in our faces for years. Every family dinner, every phone call, every conversation somehow becomes about your amazing business and your incredible achievements. You never ask about my career or my dreams. You just assume that what you're doing is more important than what anyone else is doing." The accusation hung in the air, and I realized that Madison genuinely believed what she was saying. In her mind, my professional success was a personal attack on her worth as a person. But as I looked around the room at my parents, who were nodding along with Madison's rant, I realized that they shared her perspective. My achievements weren't seen as individual accomplishments. They were viewed as threats to the family's emotional equilibrium. I left that house knowing that the war wasn't just about business or money. It was about my right to exist as a successful person within my own family. And based on everything I had discovered, it was a war I was currently losing. 2 weeks later, I received the call that confirmed my worst fears. Sterling Industries was officially withdrawing from the acquisition deal, citing undisclosed financial liabilities and concerns about management integrity. 4 years of work, $52 million, and my entire professional future had vanished because of my family's systematic sabotage. But even that devastating blow paled in comparison to what happened next. Jake burst into my office that afternoon with a newspaper in his hand, his face pale with shock. "Teresa, you need to see this." The headline in the Business Journal read, "Local tech entrepreneur accused of family financial abuse." Below it was a photo of Madison looking concerned and vulnerable, sitting in what appeared to be a lawyer's office. The article described Madison as a struggling artist who had discovered that her successful sister had been systematically draining family resources to fund her business ventures. According to Madison's account, I had pressured our elderly parents into providing loan guarantees they couldn't afford and had threatened to cut off all family contact if they didn't comply with my financial demands. She also alleges, the article continued, that Teresa Chen has been monitoring family communications and using personal information to intimidate relatives who questioned her business practices. Every accusation in the article was the exact opposite of what had actually happened. Madison had taken the truth of their crimes and flipped it completely, positioning herself as the victim of my alleged abuse. The article quoted a family friend who was described as a long-time observer of the Chen family dynamics. This anonymous source claimed that I had always been controlling and manipulative, and that my recent success had escalated existing patterns of psychological and financial abuse. I recognized the language immediately. It was too sophisticated and legally careful to be Madison's own words. Someone with knowledge of corporate law and public relations had helped her craft this narrative. My suspicion was confirmed when I read the final paragraph of the article. Madison was represented by Harrison & Associates, a high-profile law firm that specialized in corporate litigation and media relations. Their services typically cost thousands of dollars per hour, money that Madison definitely didn't have. Someone was funding her legal campaign against me, and that someone understood exactly how to destroy a business reputation through strategic media manipulation. Jake had been doing his own research while I read the article. "Teresa, look at this," he said, showing me his laptop screen. "Madison has been active on social media for weeks, building a narrative about family financial abuse. She's got thousands of followers now, and her story is getting picked up by multiple news outlets." Her Instagram account, which had previously featured photos of coffee drinks and community theater rehearsals, had transformed into a platform for sharing her truth about growing up with an abusive and controlling sister. Each post was carefully crafted to elicit sympathy while painting me as a manipulative villain who had used my business success to intimidate family members. The posts included photos of our childhood home captioned with stories about how I had demanded financial support for my education, while forcing Madison to sacrifice her own dreams. She had reframed the college fund transfers as evidence that I had bullied our parents into giving me money that was supposed to support her artistic development. Most disturbing were the recent posts that included screenshots of what appeared to be threatening text messages from me. The messages contained language I had never used, demanding that Madison stay out of my business affairs or face serious legal consequences. I had never sent these messages. Someone had fabricated them using my phone number. Jake scrolled through more of Madison's social media content, his expression growing increasingly grim. "Teresa, she's not just telling her story. She's actively encouraging other people to come forward with their own experiences of business family abuse. This is turning into a movement." The hashtag Madison Strong was trending on Twitter with hundreds of people sharing their own stories about allegedly abusive family members who had used financial success to control relatives. Madison had somehow positioned herself as a spokesperson for family financial abuse victims, despite being the actual perpetrator of the crimes she was describing. My phone started ringing with calls from reporters wanting my response to Madison's allegations. Each conversation was a nightmare of having to defend myself against accusations that sounded plausible but were completely false. Ms. Chen. One reporter asked, "Your sister claims that you've threatened legal action to prevent family members from discussing your business practices. Can you comment on these allegations?" "The only legal action I've considered," I replied carefully, "involves the unauthorized use of my business information and forged loan documents. These are criminal matters, not family disputes." But my responses sounded defensive and legalistic compared to Madison's emotional appeals. She was winning the public relations battle by positioning herself as David fighting Goliath, while I came across as a wealthy businesswoman trying to silence a vulnerable family member. The situation deteriorated further when 3 of my remaining clients canceled their contracts, citing concerns about reputational risk and potential legal complications. Madison's media campaign was successfully destroying my business relationships and making me unemployable in the tech industry. That evening, I received a call from my Uncle Robert, my father's brother, who lived across the country in Seattle. I hadn't spoken to him in several months, but his voice was filled with disappointment and concern. "Teresa, your aunt and I just saw the news about what's happening with your family. We're shocked and saddened to learn about these allegations." "Uncle Robert," I said desperately, "the allegations aren't true. Madison and my parents have been lying about everything. They're the ones who committed fraud and identity theft." There was a long pause before he replied, "Teresa, I've known your parents for 35 years. They're good people who have always put family first. It's hard for me to believe they would do the things you're describing. Have you talked to them directly about any of this?" "We spoke with your parents last week," he said carefully. "They're devastated by your accusations and confused about why you're trying to destroy Madison's reputation. They said you've become obsessed with money and success to the point where you've lost sight of family values." My parents had been conducting their own public relations campaign within our extended family, positioning themselves as the victims of my allegedly erratic behavior. By the time I tried to tell my side of the story, they had already established a narrative that made me sound unstable and vindictive. "Uncle Robert, I can provide documentation of everything I'm claiming. Bank records, loan documents, email evidence of surveillance." "Teresa," he interrupted gently, "I think you should consider getting some professional help. This level of paranoia and hostility toward your family isn't healthy. Maybe some counseling could help you work through whatever's driving this behavior." After he hung up, I sat in my empty apartment and realized the full scope of what Madison and my parents had accomplished. They hadn't just destroyed my business deal and damaged my professional reputation. They had successfully isolated me from my extended family by convincing everyone that I was suffering from some kind of psychological breakdown. The final blow came the next morning when I received a certified letter from Harrison and Associates. Madison was filing a civil lawsuit against me for intentional infliction of emotional distress, business interference, and defamation of character. She was seeking $2 million in damages and a court order requiring me to cease all harassment and intimidation of family members. The lawsuit included affidavits from my parents supporting Madison's claims and describing me as increasingly unstable and threatening over the past several months. They had provided the court with what they claimed was evidence of my pattern of abusive behavior, including the fabricated text messages and distorted accounts of our recent confrontations. I called David immediately, but his response was not encouraging. "Teresa, this lawsuit is designed to destroy you financially even if Madison doesn't win. Defending against these allegations could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. And given the media coverage and public sympathy for Madison's story, finding an impartial jury would be extremely difficult. but we have evidence that she's lying about everything. Evidence that requires complex financial analysis and technical expertise to understand. David replied. Madison's story is simple, an emotional, successful sister, abuses struggling family members. Our story involves corporate law, identity theft, and surveillance technology. Which narrative do you think a jury will find more compelling? As I hung up the phone, I realized that Madison, with help from my parents, had executed a perfect character assassination. They had taken my legitimate grievances about their criminal behavior and flipped them into evidence of my alleged abuse and instability. Unless I could find a way to turn this situation around completely, my life as I had built it was over. I spent 3 days in my apartment barely eating or sleeping, consumed by despair and rage at the injustice of my situation. But on the 4th morning, something shifted inside me. I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks and a determination that surprised me with its intensity. Madison and my parents had made one crucial mistake in their campaign to destroy me. They had assumed I would collapse under the pressure and accept defeat. They had underestimated my resilience and my willingness to fight back when cornered. I called David and scheduled an emergency meeting. I want to fight this, I told him. Not just defend myself, but go on the offensive. I want to expose every lie they've told and every crime they've committed. David looked concerned. Teresa, that's an expensive and risky strategy. If you lose, you could face countersuits for malicious prosecution and harassment. And if I don't fight, they win anyway, I replied. At least this way there's a chance of justice. The first step was assembling a legal team that specialized in complex fraud cases and media manipulation. David connected me with Sarah Martinez, a former federal prosecutor who had successfully prosecuted several high-profile corporate fraud cases. Sarah's retainer fee was substantial, but she understood immediately what we were dealing with. This is a classic Darvo strategy, Sarah explained during our first meeting. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. Your family members are using sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques to control the narrative. Can we prove that? Absolutely, Sarah said with confidence. But we need to be strategic about how we present the evidence. Madison and your parents have made several critical errors that we can exploit. The first error was their overconfidence. Madison's social media campaign and media interviews had created a detailed public record of her claims, many of which could be proven false through objective documentation. She had made specific allegations about dates, amounts, and events that contradicted bank records, email timestamps, and other verifiable evidence. The second error was their underestimation of digital forensics. Sarah brought in a cybersecurity expert named Marcus Wong, who specialized in corporate espionage cases. Marcus's analysis of my business communications revealed not only the extent of my family's surveillance activities, but also the sophisticated methods they had used to access and distribute confidential information. Teresa, this wasn't amateur hour, Marcus explained as he showed me the technical analysis. Someone with advanced knowledge of telecommunications and data security helped your family set up this surveillance system. This level of technical sophistication suggests professional assistance. Following the digital trail, Marcus discovered that Creative Solutions Consulting, Madison's fake consulting company, had been receiving regular payments from Pinnacle Business Strategies, a corporate consulting firm that happened to be one of my company's primary competitors. Madison hadn't just been stealing my business information for her own use. She had been selling it to competitors as part of a coordinated campaign to destroy my company's competitive advantage. This changes everything, Sarah said when she saw Marcus's findings. We're not dealing with a family dispute anymore. This is corporate espionage and conspiracy to commit fraud involving multiple parties and potentially millions of dollars in damages. The third error was the fabricated text messages. Madison's lawyers had submitted these messages as evidence in her lawsuit, but Marcus's forensic analysis revealed that they had been created using spoofing software rather than sent from my actual phone. The metadata associated with the messages proved they were fraudulent, which meant Madison had committed perjury in her court filings. Armed with this evidence, Sarah filed our own lawsuit for corporate espionage, identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. We also filed criminal complaints with both state and federal authorities, since the crimes had crossed state lines and involved wire fraud. But Sarah's most brilliant strategic move was reaching out to other tech companies that had been targeted by Pinnacle Business Strategies' unusual corporate intelligence gathering methods. "Teresa, your family wasn't the first to be used this way," Sarah explained after a week of investigation. "Pinnacle has been identifying vulnerable family relationships within competing companies and exploiting them to gain access to proprietary information. We've found at least 6 other cases where family members were recruited to spy on successful relatives." This revelation transformed my case from an isolated family dispute into evidence of a larger criminal conspiracy. Sarah organized the other victims into a coordinated legal response that made our case much stronger and more credible. Meanwhile, Marcus had been analyzing Madison's social media campaign and discovered that many of her followers and supporters were fake accounts managed by the same public relations firm that worked with Pinnacle Business Strategies. The grassroots movement supporting Madison was largely artificial, created to amplify her story and make it appear more credible than it actually was. "We can prove that Madison's online support network was purchased and manufactured," Marcus explained. "This reveals the calculated and premeditated nature of the defamation campaign." The breakthrough came when Sarah's team discovered that Harrison and Associates, Madison's law firm, had a financial relationship with Pinnacle Business Strategies that hadn't been disclosed in court filings. The law firm had received significant payments from Pinnacle in the months before taking Madison's case, creating a conflict of interest that violated legal ethics rules. "This is the smoking gun," Sarah told me excitedly. "Madison didn't just happen to find expensive legal representation for her lawsuit against you. She was provided with lawyers as part of the conspiracy to destroy your business." With all this evidence in hand, Sarah scheduled a meeting with Madison's legal team to present our findings and offer a settlement opportunity. The meeting took place in a downtown law firm conference room, with Madison, her lawyers, and my parents all present. Sarah methodically presented our evidence, starting with the financial fraud and identity theft, moving through the corporate espionage and conspiracy charges, and ending with the proof of perjury and manufactured social media campaigns. "Your clients have committed multiple felonies," Sarah concluded calmly. "They face potential prison time, significant financial penalties, and civil liability that could reach into the millions of dollars. However, my client is willing to consider a settlement that includes full restitution, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and cooperation with ongoing criminal investigations." The silence in the room was deafening. Madison's face had gone completely white, and my parents looked like they were about to be sick. Even their lawyers seemed shocked by the extent of the evidence against them. Madison was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "We didn't know it would go this far." "You didn't know what would go this far," Sarah pressed. "The business stuff," Madison said, glancing nervously at her lawyers. "Pinnacle said they just wanted information about Teresa's clients and strategies. They said it was normal competitive intelligence. So you admit to providing confidential business information to Teresa's competitors." Madison looked around the room, desperately realizing she had just confessed to corporate espionage in front of multiple witnesses. "I want to speak with my daughter privately," my father said suddenly. But it was too late for damage control. Sarah had recorded the entire meeting, and Madison's admission had confirmed the central elements of our conspiracy case. The meeting ended with Madison's lawyers requesting time to consult with their clients about a potential plea agreement. As we left the conference room, Sarah turned to me with a satisfied expression. "Teresa, I think they're finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what they've done. And more importantly, they're starting to realize that you're not the helpless victim they thought you were." For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that justice might actually be possible. 6 months after that devastating anniversary dinner, I found myself sitting in the same conference room where Madison had made her inadvertent confession. But this time, the atmosphere was completely different. Sarah sat beside me, looking satisfied as she reviewed the final settlement documents. Across the table, Madison and my parents looked exhausted and defeated their expensive lawyers, replaced by a public defender and a court-appointed attorney. The criminal investigations had moved faster than anyone expected. Once federal authorities began examining Pinnacle Business Strategies' corporate espionage activities, they discovered a web of fraud and conspiracy that extended far beyond my case. Madison's cooperation with the investigation had earned her a reduced sentence, but she still faced 18 months in federal prison for her role in the conspiracy. My parents had avoided prison time by agreeing to pay full restitution and testify against Pinnacle's executives. The financial penalties were substantial. They had to repay every dollar they had stolen or fraudulently obtained, plus interest and damages. This meant selling their house, liquidating their retirement accounts, and declaring bankruptcy. But the most satisfying moment came when the federal prosecutor read Madison's victim impact statement aloud in court. In it, she finally acknowledged the truth about everything that had happened. "I was jealous of my sister's success," Madison had written. "I convinced myself that she didn't deserve her achievements and that I had been unfairly overlooked by our family. When Pinnacle Business Strategies contacted me and offered to pay for information about Teresa's company, I told myself I was just leveling the playing field. But I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I knew it would hurt Teresa's career and reputation." The statement continued with details about how Pinnacle had coached her through the media manipulation campaign, provided the fake social media accounts, and connected her with Harrison and Associates for the fraudulent lawsuit. Every step of their plan to destroy my career had been carefully orchestrated by professionals who understood exactly how to weaponize family relationships for corporate advantage. Teresa had every right to be angry with our parents and with me. Madison's statement concluded, "She worked hard for everything she achieved, and instead of supporting her, we punished her for succeeding. I am deeply sorry for the pain I caused my sister, and I hope someday she can forgive me for betraying her trust and love." Reading those words in open court was more vindicating than any financial settlement could have been. After years of gaslighting and manipulation, Madison had finally acknowledged reality. The civil lawsuits had been equally successful. Sterling Industries, learning about the corporate espionage that had influenced their decision to withdraw from our acquisition deal, approached me about reviving the transaction. The new offer was actually more generous than the original, largely because my company's reputation had been enhanced by the media coverage of our victory against corporate fraud. "Teresa, you've become a symbol of entrepreneurial resilience," my new business manager explained as we reviewed the updated acquisition terms. "Other tech companies want to work with someone who successfully fought back against corporate espionage. Your story has made you more valuable, not less." The acquisition deal closed 3 weeks later for $68 million instead of the original $52 million. I had not only recovered from my family's betrayal, I had emerged stronger and more successful than before. But perhaps the most meaningful victory was the transformation in my family relationships. My parents, forced to confront the reality of their favoritism and the criminal consequences of their actions, had begun attending family therapy sessions. The therapist, Dr. Rebecca Thompson, helped them understand how their treatment of Madison and me had created the toxic dynamics that led to the conspiracy. Robert and Linda. Dr. Thompson explained during one of our joint sessions, "You created a competitive environment where Madison felt she had to destroy Teresa's success in order to feel worthy of love. Your favoritism didn't help Madison. It taught her that she was incapable of achieving anything on her own merit." The sessions were difficult and emotional, but they led to genuine changes in how my parents approached their relationships with both their daughters. They began acknowledging their past mistakes and working to rebuild trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. My relationship with Madison was more complicated. During her prison sentence, we exchanged letters where she continued to take responsibility for her actions and expressed genuine remorse for the pain she had caused. When she was released after serving 14 months, we met for coffee at a neutral location. "Teresa, She said, looking older and more mature than I had ever seen her. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I've spent every day of the past year and a half thinking about how wrong I was. Prison gave me time to understand that my jealousy and resentment were destroying both of us." Madison had used her time in prison to earn certifications in business administration and nonprofit management. She'd also participated in victim impact programs that helped her understand the real consequences of financial crimes on families and businesses. "I want to make amends," she continued, "but I know that means more than just apologizing. I want to find a way to contribute something positive to the world instead of just tearing down what other people have built." 6 months after her release, Madison started working for a nonprofit organization that helped small business owners protect themselves from corporate espionage and family financial abuse. Her inside knowledge of how these crimes were committed made her uniquely qualified to help other victims recognize and prevent similar attacks. The irony wasn't lost on me. Madison had found her true calling by helping to solve the very problems she had once created. My parents had also made significant changes in their lives. After losing their house and declaring bankruptcy, they moved into a small apartment and began working to rebuild their finances through honest labor. Dad took a job as a customer service representative at a local bank while Mom worked part-time at a nonprofit counseling center. "We spent so many years taking the easy path," Dad told me during one of our monthly family dinners, which had resumed after 18 months of therapy and gradual trust building. "We enabled Madison's worst impulses and ignored your achievements because it was easier than dealing with the real problems in our family. We were scared that if Madison couldn't succeed, it would reflect poorly on us as parents," Mom added. "So we kept rescuing her from the consequences of her own choices, and we minimized your success because it made Madison's struggles more apparent." These admissions were painful but necessary. My parents had to confront the fact that their favoritism hadn't helped Madison develop resilience or self-reliance. It had taught her that she was entitled to success without effort, and that other people's achievements were obstacles to be removed rather than examples to be emulated. The extended family relationships had also been repaired through a combination of legal evidence and patient explanation. Uncle Robert, who had initially dismissed my allegations as paranoia, became one of my strongest supporters after learning about the federal criminal convictions. "Teresa, I owe you a tremendous apology," he said during a family reunion 2 years after the criminal trials concluded. "I should have listened to your side of the story before assuming that you were the problem. Your strength and determination in fighting back against this conspiracy is inspiring." Today, 3 years after that disastrous anniversary dinner, my life looks completely different. My company has grown beyond anything I imagined possible, with multiple successful acquisitions and a reputation for integrity that attracts both clients and investors. I've been featured in business magazines not just for my entrepreneurial success, but for my advocacy work helping other business owners protect themselves from family-based corporate espionage. More importantly, I've learned to value relationships based on mutual respect and genuine support, rather than biological obligation. My chosen family now includes business partners who celebrate my achievements, friends who offer honest advice and encouragement, and colleagues who understand that success requires both individual effort and community support. Madison and I have developed a cautious but genuine friendship, built on honesty about our past and shared commitment to healthier patterns going forward. She often speaks at business conferences about corporate espionage prevention, sharing her story as a cautionary tale about how family relationships can be weaponized by sophisticated criminals. "My sister didn't deserve what our family put her through," Madison said during a recent conference presentation. But her refusal to accept injustice and her determination to fight back with truth and evidence saved all of us from a path that would have destroyed our lives completely. My parents and I have rebuilt our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect and clear boundaries. They attend my business events and celebrate my achievements genuinely without comparisons or qualifications. When they express pride in my accomplishments, it feels authentic rather than obligatory. The most satisfying aspect of this transformation has been watching Madison discover her own legitimate talents and build genuine self-respect through honest work. She's become an effective advocate for small business owners, using her communication skills and hard-won wisdom to make a positive difference in people's lives. I spent so many years trying to tear you down because I couldn't figure out how to build myself up. Madison told me recently, but success isn't a zero-sum game. Your achievements don't diminish my worth, and my failures don't enhance your value. We can both succeed without competing against each other. This experience taught me that sometimes the people closest to you will try to dim your light to make themselves feel brighter. But your worth isn't determined by their inability to see it. When you stand up for yourself with dignity and truth, you not only protect your future, but give others permission to do the same. Family isn't about blood. It's about genuine love, respect, and support. Sometimes the family that truly matters is the one you choose and build through your integrity and actions. And sometimes, fighting back against injustice with courage and evidence can transform not just your own life, but the lives of everyone involved. The greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to demand the respect you deserve, even when that courage comes at a high cost. Justice may be delayed, but when you refuse to accept defeat and fight back with truth, it becomes inevitable. I'd love to hear your thoughts about family dynamics and standing up for yourself. Have you ever faced a situation where family members tried to undermine your success? How did you handle it? Please share your experiences in the comments below, like this video, if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges, and share this with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you have the strength to demand the respect and recognition you deserve, no matter who tries to convince you otherwise.